Well, here we are with the penultimate episode of Inside Number 9. How are we all doing? I'm having mixed emotions myself. Part of me is really excited to see how they finish the show, but another part of me is almost apprehensive to watch the final episode because when it's over, well, then it's over for good. And yeah, I know, don't be sad that it ended, be glad that it happened, but I am genuinely feeling a bit melancholic knowing that those last credits will be rolling very soon, to the point I'd almost be tempted to put off watching it. Is that weird? I won't though, I'll be watching it on broadcast, don't worry about that. And speaking of being anxious about finishing things, let's talk about The Curse of the Ninth. Now, this episode was just the perfect premise for an episode of this series, and I wonder how long they've been sitting on it. For the record, I didn't know what The Curse of the Ninth was until about last week, but my fiancé, who's a composer and did an undergrad in classical music, definitely knew all about it, and has given me some very interesting insights into this episode and its score, probably more than I can go into here. So basically, the Curse of the Ninth is a superstition that came about during the late Romantic period that led people to believe that a curse would fall upon a composer while writing their Ninth Symphony. Details vary, but the belief was that the artist was doomed to die or succumb to some other terrible fate, either during their work or soon after the Ninth Symphony was completed. And this was something many people genuinely believed, including the composer Gustav Mahler, who the episode mentions directly. And the information it gives is pretty accurate, apparently. Mahler was painfully aware of the deaths of Beethoven and Schubert, who were said to be victims of this curse. Terrified of meeting the same fate, he decided to write his Ninth Symphony, but not actually call it a symphony, so that it wouldn't count. But after managing to complete his song cycle, which was the loophole he chose to go with, Mahler never lived to complete his 10th Symphony, thus confirming the superstition for many music lovers to this day. However, this curse idea only really works if you look at a relatively small era of music in isolation, as many composers have completed well over 9 symphonies during their lifetime. Still, it makes for a great story, and one that could certainly make composers at the time feel pretty anxious or outright paranoid. So, what about the episode? The Curse of the Ninth has a very strong opening, which shows composer Nathaniel, played by Eddie Marsan, in a state of torment as he attempts to complete his Ninth Symphony while being driven or driving himself insane in the process. Later, a piece of his work is discovered by Jonah, a piano tuner and would-be composer, which attracts the interest of Nathaniel's widow Lillian, her lawyer Dickie Van Ars, and her housekeeper Devonshire. So easy to get those mixed up. Nefarious plotting ensues, conflicting opinions arise over the value and purpose of art, and the big question remains, is there really a Curse of the Ninth? So this is, I think, the third episode of Number 9 that would be considered a period piece, along with The Trial of Elizabeth Gadge in Series 2 and maybe The Devil of Christmas, although the commentary for that last one was set in the present day. Correct me if I'm wrong, I know some of you will. Anyway, the Edwardian manor setting gives us some absolutely gorgeous and atmospheric set pieces, plus I've seen several people on Twitter praising the lighting, which I must say is absolutely deserved. I saw that the Radio Times review criticised the setting for breaking the rules of Number 9 by having the action spread out across different interior and exterior settings, thus removing the claustrophobic quality that has become a hallmark of the series. I disagree. I think that the feeling of being trapped is still very much there, especially as the plot develops, and I was personally very happy to see such a diverse range of backgrounds. Real good visual treat. Performances are, as always, absolutely marvellous, with an exceptional turn by Natalie Dormer, who's just perfectly cast as Lillian, the Lady of the Manor, and she's a fantastic screen presence in general. Also, shout out to the delightfully sardonic Hayley Squires as Devonshire, and to Eddie Marsan, whose role is brief but perfectly done. His scenes really help to build up the M.R. James-esque horror feel of the episode, and there's some brilliant moments between Hayley Squires and Reece Shearsmith, often fluctuating between comedy and horror, sometimes abruptly. Expect some surprising turns and intriguing plot developments with this one if you haven't seen it already. Special mention, of course, goes to the episode's score, which is practically a main character in its own right. And in a story all about musical composition and the creation of art, I'd say rightfully so. The themes being composed by the characters in the story is echoed by the score and instrumentation within the episode. And this is where I'm really starting to miss the Inside Number 9 podcast, because I would love to hear about how it was all put together. Whether the entire soundtrack was recorded using sample libraries or if some live musicians were used as well, the score sounds authentically grand and orchestral, and it's possibly the most ambitious music the show has ever featured, at least since Deadline, where much of the score was being performed live. So yeah, standing ovation. I also have it on good authority that the musical references within the script were both accurate and period appropriate, as it's very much in the style of the late Romantics, and it's always very satisfying to me to know that the writers have outdone themselves in terms of research. Now, I'd like to talk some more about the plot, and that's going to require some spoilers, so if you haven't seen it yet, I'll leave you here and I'll see you back for whatever the final episode turns out to be. So far, they have given us no clues at all. All of the clips from the Series 9 trailer were from episodes 1 to 5. There were no preview or posters shown after this week's episode, and all we have is the placeholder title Plodding On, and the images used to promote the fake out bus episode Hold On Tight. So maybe we're finally getting that bus episode after all. I really don't think so, to be honest, but seriously, what are they up to? It's driving me mad. Anyone else feeling the same? But at least we don't have to hold out for too much longer, so whatever it is, make sure you like, subscribe and come back next week for a bit of post number 9 chatter. Right, so we're going to talk a bit about the Curse of the Nine's plot and ending, and that's going to include some spoilers. So there's your warning. First up, I thought the foreshadowing with the jigsaw puzzle was very nicely done, even if jigsaws at number 9 have me slightly apprehensive after to having to hold, which if you've seen it, you'll understand why. Plus, it makes sense to have it here because the curse seems to apply both to the creation of the Ninth Symphony and also specifically to its completion, as in all of the pieces being assembled together in the correct order. Even if Lillian didn't actually write the music, just as she probably didn't draw the picture or physically create the jigsaw puzzle, there's clearly the sense of satisfaction in placing the final piece, or maybe that was something to do with Lillian's intentions to sell the work for cold hard cash that brought the curse upon her so quickly. But still, I'm left with a few questions. For instance, was Lillian lying when she claimed to have had no musical training? I know the question of why didn't she complete it herself could apply to the physical act of assembling the sheet music, but I couldn't help but wonder if there was some hint that I'd missed. Also, how Jonah seemed to know that this was a legitimate way of tricking Lillian is not 100% clear, but maybe he was just trying anything, to see if that could work and help him to avoid the curse for himself. But did Jonah completely manage to avoid the curse in the end? That we'll never know, though there is a high chance that he'll spend the remainder of his life, however long that is, haunted by all the things he's seen and done, including smacking a woman in the head with a shovel before burying her alive, all seemingly with zero consequences. That might be a very dark and subtle bit of class commentary going on there, but either way, that's probably the worst way I can imagine having to go. And it's our second buried alive plot point of the series, so they're really going to roll with this one. Some criticism has been given to the pacing and tone of the episode, and yes, to be honest, I can see where they're coming from, although it didn't ruin the experience for me personally. We've got the setting moving from room to room and lengthy conversations between characters to provide the background and exposition, which I can see probably slowed things down a bit in the middle for some viewers. I found the dialogue engrossing enough, plus the grave robbing scene and Reese's performance afterwards definitely kept me on edge, but if you felt differently then that's okay, of course. For some, maybe it also felt a bit tonally jarring, with the double entendres and fingering jokes coming thick and fast in the beginning, only to drop off without trace once the plot starts to develop. Yeah, that was a bit of an extreme departure with no warning. I did make some sense of it by thinking that Lillian might be deliberately flirting with Jonah as a means of controlling him, and then she soon drops this tactic once she sees that Jonah has responded purely out of awkwardness. I don't know, but I did want to see more of that conniving side of her personality, and that quick attempt at flirting and then dropping the idea did remind me of a particular scene from Saltburn. And now I'm laughing, picturing number 9 going for the same ending, murder on the dance floor and all. There was one other thing, and this is definitely more of a personal preference, but I could have done without actually seeing the curse in person. No shade to James Swanton, who was certainly the best man for the job, and I'm glad he got to be in a number 9. But to be honest, I tend to love horror the most when there's a bit more ambiguity over whether or not the curse, ghost, or supernatural entity is real, or whether things are happening purely within the person's head. That amazing shot of the curse's shadow looming over Lillian on the staircase would have been plenty enough for me, and perhaps if she'd fallen to her death through some act of hubris, then that would have been a bit more narratively satisfying, in my opinion. However, I can't argue with the twist being Natalie Dormer's neck, of course, which was wonderfully gruesome, and having the pages fluttering to the ground as the music reached a crescendo was just great. Oh yeah, and on my second viewing, I finally noticed the hair. Look behind a large vase near a wall right at the end as Lillian walks by with the manuscript, and you should be able to make out its shape right behind it. I've been a terrible hair spotter this series so far, but still, I've got one more chance next week. Also, side note, but I've seen a few people point out that the curse kind of looks like Richmond from the IT crowd, and now I can't unsee it. So, what did everyone think of The Curse of the Ninth? And who else is counting the hours until the final episode? The wait is almost over. I'm probably going to be very upset when it all ends, but if you're in the same boat, then we can hang out here as a post number 9 emotional support group or something, because I'm definitely going to keep talking about this show anyway. That is if I'm still around next week after I complete my Series 9 review, and provided I don't run into the curse on my way upstairs. Having said that, I didn't actually review the first 4 series in this format, as I hadn't started making number 9 content until after the first 4 series had already aired. However, I keep getting asked if I'll go back and make those reviews at some point, and you know what? I think I will. If we can debunk the curse and make sure it is safe to do so. Anyway, I've rambled on for long enough now, so thank you for listening. Please leave your comments down below, I really do love to read them. And ring the bell to hear my opinions on the final episode as soon as that video gets uploaded. Thank you all, I'm really going to miss doing these reviews for new episodes, but unfortunately, the end is nigh. See you next week.